Everything comes in its time. The old Master Kaito walked slowly along the stone path that wound between the cherry trees in bloom. The morning breeze carried pink petals, which danced in the air before gently settling on the ground. By his side, the young disciple Haru looked impatiently at the horizon, as if waiting for something to happen. "Master, when will I learn everything I need to know?" Haru asked, furrowing his brow. Kaito smiled without stopping his walk. "Everything comes in its time, Haru." But the young man was not satisfied with that answer. Since he had arrived at the temple, he had been working hard every day on meditation, exercises, and teachings. Yet, he felt that knowledge was elusive, like water slipping through his fingers. What if that time never comes? He insisted, a hint of frustration in his voice. Kaito stopped next to a cherry tree and touched its trunk with the palm of his hand. "Look at this tree," he said. "Could it bloom before spring?" Haru shook his head. "No, master." "Then why do you expect to receive wisdom before it's your time?" Haru lowered his gaze, but he still didn't fully understand. Kaito resumed walking, and the disciple followed in silence. After a while, they reached a small stream. The water flowed calmly, reflecting the sky. Kaito knelt by the shore and picked up a handful of wet earth. Then he let it slip through his fingers. "If you plant a seed in the soil, do you think it will grow faster if you stretch it with your hands?" "No, master. It would break." Kaito nodded. "Then why try to rush your own growth?" Haru didn't answer right away. His thoughts were like the stream, restless, constantly moving. But something in Kaito's words began to settle within him. "Master, does this mean I should trust in time?" Kaito smiled and stood up. "Bamboo takes years to put down roots before its stalk grows. If you don't understand patience, you will never see its height." Haru looked at the stream, then at the cherry tree, and for the first time, he felt the urgency in his heart begin to calm. "Everything comes in its time," he whispered to himself. The master nodded, and they both continued walking. Days passed, and Haru tried to apply the words of Master Kaito, but restlessness still lingered in his heart. He woke up before dawn to meditate, practiced the tea ceremony with meticulous precision, and repeated the katas with his bakken until his muscles ached. Yet, inside, impatience remained like a river that could not find rest. One afternoon, while sweeping the temple's stone garden, he overheard two elderly monks speaking under the shade of a willow tree. "They say old man Takashi has finally understood the koan the master gave him 30 years ago," one of them commented. 30 years. The other replied with a slight laugh. "How curious time is, it always comes when it must." Haru felt a chill run down his spine. 30 years to understand a single teaching? How long would it take him to attain wisdom? That night he couldn't sleep. His mind was a whirlwind of questions and doubts. He got up and went to the garden, where the moon bathed the pond in its silver light. He found Master Kaito sitting on the ground, contemplating the reflection of the sky in the water. "Master," Haru whispered, approaching cautiously. Kaito didn't take his eyes off the pond. "Why can't you sleep, Haru?" The young man hesitated for a moment before answering. "I don't understand. How can someone wait 30 years to understand? Isn't it despairing?" The master smiled faintly and pointed to the moon reflected in the water. "If you throw a stone into the pond, will you be able to see the moon clearly?" Haru shook his head. "The water will ripple, and the image will distort." Kaito nodded. "That is how the mind is when it is impatient. But if you let the water settle, the moon will reappear." Haru silently observed the reflection. Something inside him began to change. He realized that his anxiety to learn was like a stone falling into the pond of his mind, disturbing the clarity he sought. "So," he murmured, Should I just let everything flow on its own? Kaito looked at him with tenderness. It's not about giving up, but about trusting. The river doesn't need to rush to reach the sea. Haru took a deep breath and felt, for the first time, that his heart began to calm. Days turned into weeks, and although impatience still whispered inside him, Haru began to observe it rather than being swept away by it. He discovered that, when he stopped clinging to the urgency of learning, his movements in practice became more fluid, his mind clearer, and his heart lighter. One morning, while drawing water from the temple's well, he saw an old farmer working in the garden. His wrinkled hands carefully tilled the soil with infinite patience, planting small seeds with great care. Intrigued, Haru approached. "Sir, how do you know these seeds will bear fruit?" he asked. The old man smiled without stopping his work. "I don't know," he replied, "but I trust they will. The earth knows its time." Haru frowned. What if they never grow? The old man stopped digging and looked at him with eyes full of calm. "Then I simply accept that it is not the time yet, or perhaps it will never be. But if I stop planting out of fear of waiting, I will never see anything bloom." Haru felt those words resonate deeply within him. He bowed and returned to the temple, where he found Master Kaito fixing an old paper lamp. "Master," he said, with a mix of doubt and excitement, "I think I'm starting to understand." Kaito looked up with a smile. "Tell me." Haru took a deep breath before responding. "If I plant a seed and obsess over seeing the fruit, my anxiety will not make it grow faster. But if I trust the process and continue to care for it with patience, one day it will bloom, if it is its destiny to do so." The master nodded, satisfied. "That's right, Haru. Time cannot be hurried or stopped. It can only be lived." Haru felt a strange peace inside him. For the first time, he stopped looking at the future with impatience and began to embrace the present with gratitude. The wind blew softly, carrying with it the whisper of the trees. The season of rain. The rainy season arrived at the temple. The drops fell gently onto the rooftops, forming small streams that ran between the stones of the path. Haru watched from the threshold of the dojo, feeling how the scent of the damp earth filled his lungs. Master Kaito approached with an oiled paper umbrella and sat next to him. For a while, neither spoke. They only listened to the music of the rain, the slow and steady rhythm with which the sky nourished the earth. "Master," Haru said after a long silence, "there is something I still don't understand." Kaito looked at him with curiosity. "Tell me, Haru." The young man furrowed his brow, carefully choosing his words. "I have learned to accept time. I understand that I shouldn't rush life. But what happens when someone waits and what they long for never comes?" The master smiled gently and extended the umbrella over both of them. "Let's walk, Haru." They stood up and, without hurry, began to walk through the temple under the drizzle. The puddles reflected the lit lanterns, and the drops tapped the bamboo leaves with a rhythmic murmur. "Look at this bamboo," said Kaito, stopping in front of a group of tall, green stalks. "During the first years of its life, it seems like it doesn't grow. The seed is underground, invisible to the eyes. But beneath the surface, its roots extend and strengthen. And when it's ready, in just a few weeks, it rises toward the sky." Haru nodded, but there was still something that troubled him. And what if that moment never comes? What if someone waits for something that never happens? Kaito looked at him tenderly. "Then perhaps you were waiting for the wrong seed." Haru furrowed his brow. "What do you mean, master?" Kaito knelt and touched the damp earth. "Some seeds are not meant to bloom, and others take longer than we imagine. But if you only cling to a single fruit, you might overlook the garden growing around you." Haru felt a tremor in his heart. For years, he had longed for answers, had hoped to attain wisdom, but he had never stopped to look at what was already sprouting inside him. Master Kaito stood up and smiled. If the bamboo stopped putting down roots because it couldn't see its growth on the surface, it would never reach the sky. The rain continued falling, but now, to Haru, it seemed sweeter, more alive. And for the first time in a long time, he stopped waiting. He simply walked. The sound of the rain faded with the passing days, giving way to clear skies and fresh air. The cherry trees began to be covered in buds, and life at the temple continued its course. Haru, however, perceived everything with a new clarity. One morning, while sweeping the stone courtyard, he heard the sound of hurried footsteps. Turning around, he saw a young monk, Riku, breathless. "Haru, Master Kaito is waiting for you at the pond garden. He says it's the moment." The moment. Haru felt his heart beat strongly, but not from anxiety, but from the certainty that, whatever the reason, he was ready. He put the broom aside and walked silently toward the pond, where he found Master Kaito sitting on a large rock, observing the reflection of the sky in the water. "Sit, Haru," Kaito said without looking away from the pond. The young man obeyed, crossing his legs calmly. "Do you know why I called you?" Haru thought about the question before answering. "I don't know, Master, but it doesn't trouble me. I know that when something is meant to come, it will." Kaito smiled faintly. "You have learned well." Haru bowed his head in gratitude. Kaito took a dry leaf and dropped it onto the surface of the water. They both watched it float, carried by the gentle current. "Haru, tell me," asked the master, in a serene voice, "if you throw a stone into the water, when do the waves calm?" Haru reflected for a moment before responding. "When the water stops resisting and returns to its natural state." Kaito nodded. "That is life. When we stop fighting against time, when we accept the flow of things, we find peace." The wind blew gently, swaying the branches of the trees. Haru closed his eyes and felt the truth in those words. For so long, he had chased wisdom, not realizing that, like water, he only needed to let everything follow its course. Master Kaito stood up and looked toward the horizon. "Come with me, Haru. It's time to walk." And without further words, he walked down the path, leaving it to the disciple to decide if he was ready to follow. Haru smiled and, without hesitation, stood up. The sun was at its highest point when Haru followed Master Kaito down the stone path. They walked in silence, letting the song of the birds and the crunching of the leaves beneath their feet fill the space between them. After a while, Kaito stopped in front of an old plum tree. Its branches were filled with small green fruits, still unripe. The master picked one between his fingers and showed it to Haru. "Tell me, Haru, what would happen if you tried to eat this fruit now?" Haru observed the plum closely. "It would be bitter, master. It's not ready." Kaito nodded with a slight smile. "But if you wait for the right time, it will become sweet," Haru responded before Kaito finished the sentence. The master dropped the fruit into Haru's palm. "This is also how knowledge, desires, and life itself work. If we try to force things before their time, we only find bitterness. But if we trust and let everything ripen in its own time, the sweetness comes on its own." Haru held the small plum in his hands and, for the first time, felt that he truly understood. He took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill his lungs. For so long, he had wanted immediate answers, fruits ready to harvest without letting the tree do its work. Now, he understood that it was not about waiting passively, but about cultivating patience and trust, watering the earth, and allowing nature to do its part. Master Kaito began walking again. "Come, Haru. There's something else I want to show you." The young man followed without question, with peace in his soul, ready for whatever would come. Master Kaito and the Path of Time. Master Kaito led Haru to the top of a hill where they could see the entire valley. The sun was slowly descending, tinting the sky with golden and crimson hues. The wind blew gently, moving the rice stalks that danced like a golden sea under the light of the sunset. Kaito stopped and pointed at the landscape. "Look closely, Haru. Everything in this valley follows its own rhythm. The rivers flow without hurry. The trees grow without asking how long it will take to reach the sky. The sun sets without worrying about whether it will rise again tomorrow." Haru observed in silence. He felt the vastness of the landscape, the perfect harmony of all things happening in their own time. Man suffers because he resists this natural flow. Kaito continued. He wants winter to end before its time, for the crops to grow faster, for love to arrive when he desires. But life doesn't follow our demands. It follows its own course. The young disciple closed his eyes and let the wind caress his face. Everything the master said resonated inside him, as if he had always known it but had never stopped to listen. "Master," Haru whispered, "and how do we know if we are on the right path?" Kaito smiled tenderly. "When you stop asking when and begin to fully live in the now, then you will know that you are on the path." Haru felt a deep peace in his heart. For so long, he had searched for answers, waited for signs, and wanted to force his own growth. But now he understood that everything was already happening, just in its right time. The sun continued to set, painting the horizon with its last light. Haru exhaled slowly, feeling that, for the first time, he was truly present. The evening breeze began to wrap around the hill as the sun completely disappeared behind the horizon. Master Kaito and Haru remained there in silence, contemplating the transition between day and night. There was no rush, no need for words. Finally, Kaito turned to his disciple and spoke in a serene voice. "Haru, what have you learned?" The young man looked at the starry sky, feeling the answer within. That everything comes in its moment, neither before nor after. That I shouldn't run after time, but walk with it. Kaito nodded with satisfaction. "That's right. Life doesn't rush, but it never stops. He who understands this finds peace." Haru smiled. It was not the peace of having reached all the answers, but the peace of knowing that he didn't need to rush to find them. Together, they descended the hill in silence, with the moon as a witness to their walk. That night, for the first time in a long time, Haru slept deeply, without anxiety about tomorrow. Because now he understood that tomorrow, like everything in life, would come exactly when it was meant to.